In 1953, two armies stopped shooting at each other and drew a line across the Korean peninsula, 4 kilometers wide, 250 kilometers long, surrounded by landmines, electric fences, and some of the most heavily armed soldiers on Earth. Nobody was allowed in. Nobody left. And for the next 70 years, something happened inside that strip of land that nobody planned, nobody managed, and nobody could quite believe when they finally got cameras inside. 6,168 species of wildlife moved in. Before the Korean War, this land was farmland. Rice paddies, villages, roads, people. Then the war came. Then the ceasefire came. Then the fences went up, the soldiers took their positions on either side, and the land was left completely alone. No farming, no logging, no hunting, no development. Not for a year, not for a decade. For 70 years, this 4-kilometer strip became the most accidentally protected piece of land in Asia. The Korean Peninsula had been one of the most ecologically damaged landscapes in East Asia by 1953. Japanese occupation from 1910 to 1945 had stripped forests for timber and hunted wildlife commercially for export. Then the war destroyed what was left: napalm, artillery, deforestation for military use. By the time the ceasefire was signed, the land that became the buffer zone was exhausted, damaged, and largely empty of wildlife. Then the soldiers walked away from it, and nature walked in. Before we get into what grew back, take a moment to understand the scale of what is sitting inside those fences. The zone covers approximately 992 square kilometers. That is larger than the entire city of Seoul. One of the most densely populated cities on Earth is right next door, and 4 kilometers away from it sits nearly 1,000 square kilometers of land that no civilian has touched in 70 years. Inside that land, researchers estimate there are 1.8 million landmines. The exact number is unknown because the records were lost, destroyed, or never properly kept. 1.8 million explosives buried in the ground, and the animals walking over them every single day have no idea. The red-crowned crane was one of the first species to reclaim the zone. This bird, one of the rarest in the world, with fewer than 3,000 individuals surviving in the wild, found the wetlands inside the buffer zone and stopped leaving. Today, the zone is one of the most important wintering sites for red-crowned cranes on Earth. 7 of the 15 crane species in the world are found in Korea, and the buffer zone is why several of them still exist at all. Historian Lisa Brady wrote that, for the red-crowned crane, the existence of this accidental sanctuary has meant the difference between survival and extinction. Not a conservation program, not a breeding facility. A ceasefire line drew a border, and a bird on the edge of disappearing found the empty land on the other side of it and chose to stay. The Asiatic black bear came next. Remote cameras set up by South Korean researchers inside the southern edge of the zone caught footage of a mother and cub in the early 2020s. Asiatic black bears had been hunted to the edge of local extinction across the peninsula. Inside the zone, with no hunters, no traps, no roads, they had quietly rebuilt a breeding population. Nobody put them there. Nobody helped them. They found the fences, walked along the perimeter until they found a gap too small for humans to use, and disappeared inside. Here is something that almost nobody outside South Korea knows. The South Korean soldiers stationed at posts along the fence have become, without any formal instruction or policy, some of the most dedicated wildlife protectors in the country. One unit became known for feeding leftover food from the mess hall to families of wild boar that gathered near the fence line every evening. At a post near Hyangro Peak, the soldiers with the strongest throwing arms were selected for a specific task, throwing cabbages over the fence to feed the Amur gorals, a critically endangered mountain goat, on the other side. A military unit, armed and on combat readiness, lobbing vegetables over a landmine field to feed an endangered species. That is the Korean border in 2024. Wildcats, musk deer, Amur gorals, yellow-throated martens. Species that had been pushed to the margins of the peninsula by human expansion were documented inside the zone in numbers researchers had not seen in decades anywhere else in the region. And then there are the rumors. Scientists who study the zone have reported second-hand accounts from border guards on both sides of large cat sightings inside the forest. Korea was once called the land of tigers. The Siberian tiger ranged throughout every mountain range on the peninsula for thousands of years. It was hunted to extinction in the south by the mid-1940s. The Amur leopard is one of the rarest cats on Earth, with fewer than 100 individuals known to survive in the wild in the Russian Far East. Neither has been definitively confirmed inside the zone, but the forest is dense, the area is enormous, and the cameras are few. The last confirmed tiger in South Korea was killed in 1922. That was 104 years ago. What is living in the deepest part of that forest, the part no human has walked through since 1953, is genuinely unknown. The total count of documented species inside the zone stands at 6,168. That includes up to 66 mammal species, more than 230 bird species, nearly 1,600 plant species, and 102 of South Korea's 267 officially listed endangered species. 38% of every endangered species in South Korea survives, in part because of a border that was drawn to keep people apart, not to protect wildlife. The zone covers roughly 0.5% of the Korean peninsula's total land area, and yet it contains more than 1/3 of the peninsula's entire catalog of endangered life. Here is what makes this different from every other conservation story. Nobody decided to do this. There was no botanist who refused to spray the weeds. There was no government program. There was no funding. There was no plan. Two governments that have been technically at war for over 70 years, that have pointed artillery at each other continuously for over 70 years, accidentally created the most species-rich protected area in East Asia. The landmines that were laid to kill soldiers are now, in a grotesque twist, protecting animals. The electric fences that were built to prevent people from crossing are the walls of a wildlife reserve that no conservation organization on Earth could afford to build or maintain. The most militarized border in the world is simultaneously the most intact ecological corridor in the region. Scientists have been trying for decades to have the zone formally designated as a peace park, a jointly managed conservation area that both governments would commit to protecting regardless of what happens politically between them. The American media entrepreneur Ted Turner supported a formal proposal in 2005. North Korea has never agreed. South Korea has proposed it multiple times. Every time political tensions rise, the conversation stops. And here is the darkest part of this story. The very thing that would end the suffering of millions of people, peace and reunification between North and South Korea, could destroy the accidental nature reserve that was created by the division. If the border opens, development follows. Roads, farms, cities. The same forces that stripped the peninsula bare before 1953 would arrive again. The wildlife that found safety in the no-man's land between two armies would have nowhere to go. The cranes that winter in the Kaorwan Basin cross freely between North and South every year. They do not know there is a border. If the border disappears, the empty land disappears with it. The zone remains protected, not by any conservation agreement, but purely by the fact that neither government will let the other one in, and neither will let anyone else in either. There is a straight line between the emptiness of a ceasefire and the fullness of a forest. 70 years of human absence, 6,000 species of wildlife, the most dangerous border on Earth, and inside it, one of the last truly wild places left in one of the most densely populated regions of the world. Nobody planted a single tree. Nobody released a single animal. The only thing that happened was that humans stopped. If a story like this changed the way you think about what land can do when it is left alone, subscribe and turn on notifications. Stories like this go up every week, and the next one will leave you speechless.